Please hear me when I say this. Wearing a wedding ring does not mean that you've won. And having a wedding doesn't mean that you chose well. And marriage does not mean that you are pretty or smart or that you are worthy. It's not proof of any of that. If anything, being married will show whether or not you are a woman of discernment or whether you are a woman who was desperate. Hi, my name is Keisha Rice. I am a dating coach. I am a hypnotherapist. I help women learn how to recognize the unhealthy relationship patterns in their lives, learn how to heal those, and then create a love life that is based on their terms of what it is that they want in a relationship. So, this whole idea of marriage being a sign that you've won, I get it. I grew up Christian. I am a preacher's daughter. So growing up in church, everything was a marriage or bust scenario, right? The second that you finish school is, okay, when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? All of that. And every time you're constantly hearing messages about he that findeth a wife and how great a wife is and how great it is to be a wife and what it's going to be like when you are finally chosen and someone puts a ring on it and marries you. And I want to say marriage is a beautiful thing. I've been married for 7 years. I love my husband. However, it is not the end all be all. And I wanted to talk to you about why this is some dangerous dating advice and how it makes you vulnerable to bad relationships and how to set yourself up and prioritize yourself so that if marriage is a goal for you, and I do think it is a worthy goal, but if that's a goal for you, how to do it right. Okay. So, marriage in itself is not inherently a reward. And I think that is one of the things that we really need to get clear of off the bat. Um, Marriage is a blessing if the person that you've married, the structure of this marriage, and the spiritual reality behind it, if all of those are sound and firm, right? So I often talk about masculine and feminine energy and about how masculine energy is a container for feminine. Same with marriage. Marriage is a container, right? So the container's only as good as what's inside it, right? You could have a container that was full of delicious juice to have with your breakfast, right? Or you could have a container that's full of poison. Um, Marriage is no different. So when you are in a bad marriage, that bad marriage is worse than any period of singleness, right? And this whole idea of chosen, being chosen is not the same as being respected, being protected, or being cherished, right? A person can choose you and do none of those other things. So, this whole idea of marriage being a prize is something that you really need to get over if you want to have a healthy relationship. Marriage is not a prize when the marriage is full of chaos, right? Um, Instead, you want to be in a marriage that gives you peace, that helps you gain wisdom, that helps you feel safe, as opposed to a marriage of, again, chaos and suffering and regret. Discernment is the thing that determines whether or not you end up in a good marriage or not. And again, so many women, including myself, have been conditioned to see marriage as a prize. And this is one of the reasons why we see so many unhealthy relationships in our society. And before anyone wants to come to me about, like, what about the men? Yes, to some extent, men too. Like, there are men who are married to women that they really don't want to be with, that they're not in love with, but they've done it because of image. They've done it because it makes them look good to be a stable family man. This is why you see men who sometimes get married to women that they don't really care about advance in the world, get the career, get the money and all. And then as soon as they get those things, they leave that woman for the woman that they really want. Our society has done a number on both men and women when it comes to marriage. However, I work with women, so that is what I'm going to be focusing on is how this whole idea and this mindset can be a detriment to us, right? So the problem is that a lot of women don't want marriage as much as they want the emotional status that they think the marriage is going to provide, right? They think that marriage is going to be proof that they are desirable enough or that you're good enough, that you were picked over other women, right? Um, that you somehow won in the journey to adulthood. Like, when the holidays come, you can finally move from sitting at the kids' table to the adults' table with all the other real adults who got married and had kids, right? And especially as a Christian woman, there's this, we're told so many things growing up in churches, right? We're told that if you'll just be patient, God will send the right man. That if you are spending your time in prayer and meditation and focusing on being pure, that marriage will be the reward for that. That if you're still single, that there's something missing, right? And let's just be real, right? Um, how many women do you know that didn't follow all the standards of purity and still got married? And not only did they get married, they're happily married. They've been married for years. They don't have any issues, or at least from what you can see in their marriage. And I'm not saying that sexual discipline isn't important. I think it is. Um, However, there's a way to embody a Christian woman seeking marriage and to do it in a way where you still have boundaries and standards, and to do it in a way in which you can be fulfilled and happy, not just settling for whatever comes along because you think it's about time you get married. Right? So, not being aware of this, not being aware of the conditioning that you have been going through, not being aware of how these mindsets can be damaging, it sets you up to be spiritually passive instead of, again, being a woman of intuition and discernment. So, when we talk about the importance of having faith, and in this case, having faith for the right relationship to come along, faith is in the absence of judgment, right? Um, when you trust God with wisdom. You don't abandon your wisdom in the process. And so often, one of the problems that I see when women come to me is I'm asking them what they want in a relationship. And oftentimes, I have clients who immediately start telling me about the fantasy that they've built in their head for their wedding and their wedding day. And weddings are beautiful, but we spend way too much time glorifying them because a wedding at the end of the day is one day, right? Marriage is something that hopefully lasts a lifetime. And because it lasts a lifetime, it needs to be examined much more thoroughly than all the planning that a lot of women put into finding the right dress or the right cake, right? So have I have clients who have created Pinterest boards, right, for their ideal wedding day. They have all these ideas about what they want their aesthetic to look like. They have videos, reels saved on Instagram and TikTok of content creators and their wedding days and what they want and what would be similar to that. Yet, what they haven't spent time on is doing the inner work on their own wounds, doing the work on their patterns, their people pleasing tendencies, their lack of boundaries. They haven't done the work on what it is that would make them a fulfilled woman beyond being in a great relationship. Because at the end of the day, a great relationship is the cherry on top to the already beautiful life that you've built. You know, again, as great as my husband is to me, he came into my life adding to the fact that I already had a good career. I already had hobbies that I enjoyed and great friends. I had already done a lot of work on myself, seeing more than one therapist. I saw coaches, including a dating coach, before I became a coach myself. I had already done all this work on myself to be a happy and fulfilled person so that I could bring someone into my life that added to that happiness and not someone that I was pressuring to be that happiness. And so often I hear women talk about they want to have a man, but they've spent absolutely no time studying conflict resolution, character, financial patterns, leadership, integrity, emotional regulation. They haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about sexual discipline. So then they get into dating situations and oftentimes potentially end up doing things that they didn't really want to do or didn't really have a lot of time to think about before they entered into that situation. They don't think about family systems and how the way they grew up influences how they date and how the men that they're meeting, what their family systems were like, and how that influences how they date and how they communicate. These are the things that you really want to take some stock of because what's the point in being prepared for a wedding day when you are completely unprepared for having a husband, right? And here's what happens when marriage becomes the prize. And if you see me looking over, I do have notes because I had a lot to say on this. Right? So, when you focus so much on making marriage the prize, what you end up doing is ignoring the red flags. I'm sure you've seen those memes where someone asks a person after a bad relationship, um, why did you ignore all these red flags? And they say, oh, I thought it was a circus or I thought it was a party. You know, when you are so focused on, again, marriage or bust, you're doing everything that it takes to get down to the altar, no matter what. You end up getting in relationships and then you ignore things like the fact that this man is inconsistent or that he's passive, that he doesn't know how to lead, that his finances are poor, maybe he's not financially stable, that he lacks emotional intelligence or emotional maturity. You end up ignoring spiritual shallowness, disrespect. Once you make marriage the prize, discernment starts to feel like it's self-sabotage, right? Because you will see all of these red flags and you will think it is just your brain trying to find all these reasons for why this relationship is not going to work. And here's a secret. It is. It is showing you all these ways in which this relationship will not work, but you are refusing to listen to that discernment. So another consequence is that you end up staying too long in bad situations, right? If this hasn't been you, then you at least know one woman who spent 5, 10, 15 years in a relationship and then the relationship ends because for whatever reason, she finally gets fed up of disrespect and she leaves. It could be as serious as abuse, or he could end up leaving her for a different model, whatever that looks like. And she's looking back and realizing that I don't want to say time is wasted because God can use anything and God turns everything into lessons, right? But she realizes that she didn't have to spend all of this time in a relationship that didn't truly serve her, right? And oftentimes, when you again center marriage and center men and make that the prize, you end up become emotionally invested in a situation that is not helpful, is not adding to your life. Back to that whole idea of my husband is the cherry on top of a good relationship or a great life that I've already built for myself. If this person, if your potential future partner is not adding to your life in any way, then what are you doing with them? Even worse, I see women in relationships with men who are actively making their lives worse and they're staying because they can say, at least I got a man. Yeah, you. got a man. But is that really what God wanted for you? Is that really the best for you? If you truly believe that God knows the plans for you and wants you to prosper, why would He want you to stay in a relationship that is making your life actively worse? Tell me that. So you can be with a person and you can be with them for years and years, and it doesn't mean that anything's advancing. You know, if marriage is a partnership, then it's a journey together, it's a purpose together. And there are so many women who stay in situations because they are confused by what the man is offering. They don't leave because they think that if they leave, they're going to have to grieve a future that they've already built in their mind about what this relationship could be, what it could have been. They were so busy dating this person's potential that they never took stock of what the relationship actually was, right? Another consequence of putting marriage on a pedestal is this idea of choosing relief over wisdom. Wanting to have healthy relationships, and honestly, this is not just about romantic relationships, taking the time to build healthy relationships with your family members, with your friends, on your job, in your business, if you're a business owner like I am. And yes, romantically, doing that takes time and it takes work. And sometimes it can be comforting to be in situations that are not as healthy, but they are less work. But what you end up doing is you get into unhealthy relationships, and yeah, you'll get relief from loneliness or from family pressure, from family and friends constantly asking you, when are you going to get a man? You'll get relief from the anxiety about your age, right? I'm not getting any younger. I need to find someone now. You'll get relief from being compared, being shamed by family members, by friends, by people at your church, and from feeling like you're behind in life because you haven't gotten married by a certain age. Yes, you will get relief from those things the second that you hop into a romantic relationship, any relationship. But that relief is temporary and it will eventually get replaced by much worse feelings. When you are seriously dating for marriage, you need to remember that you are not choosing emotional relief. You are choosing a purpose partner. You are choosing someone who's going to be there with you for the next, depending on your age, what, 50, 40, 30 years, someone who's going to be with you for a while. And you don't want to make that decision lightly. You don't want to go with just the first option that comes along. So you have to understand that the real prize is not marriage, right? The real prize is being a woman who discerns well and who surrounds herself by people who add to her life. And that includes a spouse, right? So when you are really using your discernment, when you learn to hone that, when you create a mindset that allows you to be willing to do the work in the relationship, then you're able to see reality. You're able to see who this man is consistently. You're able to see, you know, who who he prioritizes in his life. Because men will marry women and continue to prioritize their family, their friends, other things outside of you. And you're just there for convenience, right? You're a bang maid. You're there for cooking, cleaning, sex, and that's it. When you use discernment, you put yourself in situations where you're not looking at who the man could be, right? You're not looking at who he seems like because you feel chemistry, even if that chemistry is realistically a trauma bond and not real chemistry. Um, and you don't look at who he could be with the right woman. Because what happens if you aren't the right woman for him? What if you're just settling? Why would you set yourself up to be miserable like that? So, discernment at the end of the day is the ability to honor what is and not what you wish were true. what you hope will happen if this man decides to love you enough, what you hope will happen when he gets his ish together, right? What you hope will happen when he matures a little bit more. Discernment is taking at face value what is in front of you now and whether or not you truly want to live with that for the rest of your life. So, discernment also protects your future. I've seen it before on social media, this idea that behind every woman who has a downfall is a man. And this isn't meant to bash men. None of this is meant to bash men, right? I wouldn't be married if I thought all men were trash. At the same time, this is to uphold the right man and the fact that it is worth waiting for the right man. So when you have discernment, you're not just protecting your feelings, you are also protecting your peace, your finances, you're protecting your body, you're protecting your fertility window because how many women spend their 20s, 30s, even into their 40s dealing with trash men, and then they get into, beyond those fertility windows and they can't have children, and they're also not in a great relationship. You protect your nervous system, you protect your spiritual health, and you protect your time and your energy as well. Who you marry is one of the most expensive decisions that you can ever make. You cannot afford to not use your discernment. And discernment keeps you from being flattered into foolishness, right? Um, when you use your discernment, then you recognize love bombing. You recognize when someone is trying to move too fast. You recognize when somebody is talking a little too sweet, right? They say all the right things. They mirror all your values. They make it seem like it's an urgent proposition that you have to commit to them now and, get rid of any other options that you have. You can see when someone is trying to build exclusivity with you before they've built any trust with you. When you are a woman without discernment, you are a woman who can be manipulated by chemistry, by urgency, by someone who's putting on a performance. This is one of the things that I talk with my clients about all the time is that I love the beginning stages of a romance. I love the excitement that I see in my clients' eyes when they're out there, they're dating, they're meeting someone new. At the same time, sometimes those butterflies in your stomach are not butterflies, they're actually roaches. And it takes discernment to know the difference between someone who actually could be a good partner for you, someone who can add to your life and help you live in your purpose, and someone who you have just trauma bonded with, or someone that you have created chemistry with out of desperation. There's a huge difference, right? And discernment is how you actually honor God in your relationships. So, one of my favorite Bible verses, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I will constantly quote, God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and love and of a sound mind. Emphasis on that sound mind part, right? We were given discernment for a reason. And discernment is not fear, it's not being cynical and thinking that all men are trash, because again, there are great men out there. But discernment is stewardship. It is really honoring yourself, your needs, your wants, your boundaries, your standards, and only allowing yourself to have relationships with people who honor those things. Um, Womanhood is not about blind trust, right? It's about being wise enough to steward your life, to center yourself, and to make sure that everything around you adds to you. So when you have discernment, it is also harder for you to be taken advantage of, for you to be mistreated and misused. When a woman is discerning, she can't be rushed into a relationship that's not a fit. She can't be guilted into doing things that she doesn't want to do. She can't be dazzled and, impressed very easily. And she can't be chosen to the point where she ends up in a dysfunctional, unhealthy relationship. Discernment at the end of the day is self-respect. That's all it is. So here's how you know that you've made marriage an idol, right? Some of the signs are a relationship ends, and even if that relationship is unhealthy, you feel panicked about the fact that it's over with. This whole idea of like, you'll never find someone like him again. So sometimes that's the point. Like you're not going to find someone like him again. And you should honor that. You should honor the lessons learned from the relationship and move on. Another sign that you've made marriage an idol is that you're in a relationship and you struggle to be honest about that man's flaws. So here's the thing. I do believe in having trusted confidants and having accountability partners and everything. And it is one thing to have friends and not want to say everything about your relationship every time that something goes wrong, right? Again, my husband and I have been married for 7 years. There are times where he does something that I don't like or says something that I don't like. I'm not necessarily going to my friends about that because I know that it's something minor. I know that once he and I talk about it, we can, clear any misunderstandings. We can move on with our lives. On the whole, he's a great man, great husband. He's human, just like I'm human. So we all make mistakes, right? There's a difference between that, knowing that you don't go to everyone, like your family, friends, over tiny little disagreements that you know are going to be resolved, to the point of you not being completely honest about that man's character and about all the ways in which he mistreats you because you don't want other people to see how screwed up this relationship is. And you don't want other people to be in the know about these things because you are desperately holding on to this relationship so that you can say that you have a man. Another sign that you are putting marriage on a pedestal and making it into an idol is that you feel ashamed of being single, which there's so many amazing things that you can accomplish in your single season while you're actively pursuing a relationship. But there are so many things that you can accomplish in your single season that you should be happy to be in a place of taking advantage of that, right? Um, Another thing, you constantly compare your timeline. So if this friend of yours got married at age 29 and now you're 33, you're comparing and wondering what the differences are. Why is it that she was able to get married at this age and I wasn't? Another sign is you're attached to the idea of wife as an identity. Now, wife is a identity, it's one of the things that I am. But I'm also a business owner. I'm a daughter. I am a sister. I'm an aunt. Um, in addition to coaching, I'm a journalist. Um, I'm a friend. Like I have a lot of identities, and all those identities have their place and time. And that doesn't mean I glorify one identity, especially the wife one, over other identities, right? And you keep asking, how do I get married? How do I find a man? Instead of asking, how do I choose well when it comes to looking for a partner? If the thought of losing a man is worse than being misaligned in your life journey, in your life purpose, then you're not using your discernment. But what you are using is attachment and a very unhealthy attachment at that. So let's do a reset and redefine your goal. Because if you're watching me, you probably have marriage, a healthy relationship as a goal. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think, again, marriage is a beautiful thing. But instead of the goal being, I want to get married, let's change that to, I want to choose my life partner wisely. Right? Um, and then let's expand upon that goal. So take that. sit in it for a second, pause this if you need to, right? And after you feel comfortable with this idea of I want to choose wisely, now let's expand that to I want to be a woman who recognizes when someone brings me peace, when they are of good character, when they are in alignment, when they bring me safety, when they have integrity, and when they have spiritual maturity. I want to be able to recognize that in real time. I want you to understand that you don't need to be chosen quickly, right? You need to be chosen wisely, right? By somebody that you also choose out of wisdom. Um, you're not behind in life. You're being refined, you're being perfected, um, and you're allowing your life's journey to flow the way that it needs to. And you are using discernment, right? And making decisions off of what keeps you at peace and at ease instead of settling out of desperation and chaos. And your job is not securing a partner, securing a husband, securing a man. Your job is to steward your life well and to find a partner who fits into that, right? So I want you to just remember that at the end of the day, marriage is beautiful, right? But it's not a prize. Um, because plenty of women get married and lose their minds. They lose their peace. They're miserable, right? That's not what you want for yourself. There are so many women, and again, you probably know a few in your life who got the ring. And then once they got that ring, they also got years of confusion and grief and misalignment. So the real prize is discernment because discernment allows you to choose well. It allows you to walk away from situations that don't benefit you. And it allows you to recognize what is truly good when that good arrives into your life. And if you can develop that, dating becomes so much easier for you. Um, Getting to marriage, if that's your goal, becomes easier for you. And it would be much harder for someone to come into your life and misuse you and mistreat you. So let me know your thoughts. Also, feel free to share your experiences of situations you've seen where someone didn't use a lot of discernment in choosing the right partner and how, it didn't work out very well for them. And also, if you want to work with me, I would love to help you build that discernment, help you, set the terms for how you are going to attract a partner that is in alignment with your goals and your vision for your life. And to also, again, examine those unhealthy patterns, how they developed, so that you can do better in the future. Because when you know better, you do better, right? So I will put a link in the description to work with me. But in the meantime, again, take some time to focus on what it really is that you need in a relationship, what discernment you need to hone. And I will talk to you soon. Love you so much. Bye.